It's just a bunch of Bible stories. Welcome back to Deep in Bear Country, a Berenstain Bearcast. I am your host, Phil Gonzalez, and this week we've got not one, we've got not two, but three, count them, three on my fingers, Berenstain Bears books. Pow, 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 pow. That's right, 3 books. It is a banner week. Why 3 books? You're probably wondering to yourself. Why 3 books? You're probably saying to yourself, why, Phil, would you ever try to cover 3 books in one episode? Aren't you going to get way in over your head on this? To which I say no, absolutely not, because here's the secret. Lean in. I have no intention of covering them to any, realistic extent. I have no intention of going into what these books are actually about, because they're not actually about the Berenstain Bears. And so, and they've been sitting on my list, and I've actually referred back to them a few times, and I've used them in episodes. They're reference books. They contain information that is pertinent to stories we cover, but they sit on my list of books to cover, and I want them gone just so they can stop taunting me and teasing me, because this is not, first and foremost, this is a Berenstain Bears podcast. Second most, this is not a religion podcast. I know I talk a lot about religion, but that's only because that's what the stories are about. I am not just going to sit here and talk about David and Goliath. I'm not just gonna sit here and talk about Daniel in the lion's den, or Jesus on the cross, or Jesus in the cave. I'm not gonna talk about the Noah's Ark. I'm not gonna talk about the Tower of Babel. I'm not gonna bore you to tears any more than I usually do on a weekly basis. So, why am I talking about all this? It's because the 3 books I'm going to cover are, get ready, because I'm gonna bring them up. Here we go. We are going to cover the Berenstain Bears Storybook Bible, a massive tome. It's actually a pretty big book. It's a hardback book. Listen to this. That's a hardback book, everybody. It's quite a few pages long. These are not short pages. These are pages, fully illustrated, many pages in the book. It's a honkin' big book. It's got loads of stories in it from the Bible, but that's not it. That's not the only book we're going to cover, because we're also going to cover the spin-off book from it, I guess. Last year's book. This is actually a book that came out last year. The Berenstain Bears Storybook Bible, Search and Find, which is just basically this book, kind of a few pictures from this book, but kind of a Where's Waldo-y thing going on, like a look and find book. Not enough of a book to spend a whole episode on. Not fun in a flip the flap kind of way, just mostly just can you find these very easy to find things in this book? So we're going to zip through that one, but we've also got another book on our hands. That's right, we are also going to be discussing the Berenstain Bears Storybook Bible for little ones, which I do own a physical copy of, but spank me if I could find it. If I can't find it, spank me in any case. Don't don't hit me, please. I cannot find my copy of the Berenstain Bears Storybook Bible for little ones. Fortunately, it is available as an ebook, so I do have the ebook copy of it. It's weirdly formatted. I'm not a huge fan of the ebook of it, but it's better than the book not being available in ebook format, which is what the Berenstain Bears original storybook Bible is. That's right, the original storybook Bible is not available electronically, so I have to haul out this massive tome to talk about it. I also can't show you images from it very well, but that's fine, because I'm not going to be spending a ton of time on it. I'm going to kind of zip through it. Going to be talking about all these books at once, because the big question here isn't what are these books about? They're really just about, they're stories from the Bible. The big question here is, why do these books exist? What is the effectiveness of random Bible stories? Why do this? And what happens to a Bible story when you keep cutting it down to what you think are its essentials? Does the story lose its power? Does the story lose its effectiveness? What happens? Why do that? After a while, what even is the point? It'd be like if you took any book story for adults, like a novel, and cut out all the elements that make it unique and just sold it to the public as like maybe if you just eventually you're not even reading the Cliff's Notes version of a story. You're reading like someone's vague remembrances of a story, particularly as we've covered before, because I know we've talked about it, like the in the books that cover the Gospels, when they sort of mush them all together into one uber gospel, that doesn't really, then that it just loses the like meaning of all the Gospels in the first place. Like it sort of blands them out into just sort of like formless, flavorless paste, a paste of a tale. So why are we talking about this? What are we doing now? Well, how are we going to do this? Well, I have all three books. I have the Storybook Bible, I have the Storybook Bible for little ones, and I have the Storybook Bible Search and Find. And I'm going to be sort of going through all of them at the same time. Whoops, I just hit the wrong button. I hit the wrong button. Never mind. Bear with me. Bear with me, everyone. Where am I? Okay, so I'm clicking buttons on my computer while I'm doing this. There's like a billion different like little switches I have to flip when I'm doing like for the YouTube video. I'm doing this all in real time. So and there's like two monitors I have to monitor, and so I'm looking at myself in two places. Like one is like the queued up queue, and the other is like what I am actually recording. And so I'm bopping back and forth. It's very confusing. It's a multitasking thing that I'm not very good at, but that I'm doing because I love all of you. I love all of you. Well, let's get started, shall we? The Berenstain Bears Storybook Bible. Let's talk about it. The Berenstain Bears Storybook Bible. I got it right here. I already showed everyone the table of contents, which is massive. So this book came out in 2013. It's 11 years old. It's illustrated. It's credited to Jan and Mike Berenstain, but I believe this whole thing is, I think this whole thing is illustrated by Mike. I could be wrong. I believe these are all Mike illustrations. They could be Jan. There could be Jan illustrations in here. You know what? There could be Jan illustrations in here. I'm looking at the design of some of the bears, but let me run down really quick what is in this book. So besides the beginning, we have the Cubs demanding stories before bed. They ask for space grizzlies. They ask for fairy tales. They ask for animal stories. But Papa decides to give them all a bunch of great adventure tales and love stories and everything by simply reading them the entire Bible. I guess is what the idea is. It's like, that'll get them to sleep. That'll get them to sleep. So he whips up the Storybook Bible. Now, what I love about this, and this is made clear as the Berenstain Bears books go on, later on, like in more recent books that Mike puts out, the religious ones, when Papa whips out the Storybook Bible, he is basically whipping out this Storybook Bible. He's essentially pulling out the Storybook Bible that you can read, that you can buy. And I like the idea of that. I like that when you purchase the Berenstain Bears Storybook Bible, you're not just purchasing a book that's been branded with the Berenstain Bears characters. You're purchasing essentially a prop. Like this is what the Bears actually read to their kids. This is the physical book. Like if you cover up the picture of the Bear family on the front, this is just, you're holding in your hand, because of course the characters are all bears. They live in a bear-centric universe. So what's in this book? Well, let's find out. There's a table of contents right at the beginning. So you have the intro, but then you have the Old Testament. You have the in the beginning story. God created the heavens and the earth. Yeah. Adam and Eve, Noah's Ark, the tall tower, which is Babel. Joseph and his brothers, which we covered in a recent-ish book about not being able to, the King of Dreams, like all the stuff about sleep. Or did we cover that? No, that's an upcoming, sorry, everyone, that's in an upcoming episode. We're covering Joseph. I was getting confused. I've done a lot of homework ahead of time for upcoming books. We'll be covering Joseph, and we'll be able to compare it to this story, sort of. I don't know, maybe I will, maybe I won't, who cares? We have Moses, we have the 10 Commandments, we have Samson, we have David and Goliath, we have David the singer, we have Esther the queen, we have Daniel in the lion's den, Jonah and the great fish, and that's it for our like pre-Jesus stories, right? And then we get the birth of Jesus, we get the 3 wise men, we get the teaching of Jesus, we get Jesus on the sea, we get the good neighbor, the lost son, Jesus in the holy city, we get the last days of Jesus, he is risen, we get Saul becoming Paul, and then we get a little closeout at the very end. I think it's probably just the Cubs having fallen asleep. Let's see, how does it end? Yep, the Cubs are all asleep because Papa read them like 30 stories from the Bible. Of course they're asleep. I would be asleep. And I don't believe Mama is in this story at all. Mama's not in this book at all. Berenstain Bears, a whole honkin' book devoted to the Bible, devoted to their devotion to the Bible. That's all on Papa. Mama is out probably with her quilting friends, having wine, a good conversation. Papa's at home with the kids. He whips out the Bible. I think that says a lot. I think that says a lot. What does it say? Don't know. Not concerned. But I think it says a lot. So that's the roughly idea of the Storybook Bible. Now, how into these stories does this Storybook Bible get? Well, one of the ones that I always like to pull out, we have the Let My People Go series, pertinent, coming up right around the corner, the story of the Passover. So you have like great illustrations of the sea like running red, the death of the fishes, Pharaoh not letting people go. You have the plagues. You have all the plagues represented. The death of the cattle. You have the sores and boils and the frogs and the locusts. Right. Then you get the Passover itself with the blood on top of your lintel. And it says, it just says that they should mark their door at night. It doesn't say that that's actually blood. But I think for any kid with imagination, you can tell that's not paint. They do a pretty good job at making it not look like paint. It's smeary and it's a little translucent. It's not paint. And it does not mention, here's what's curious. So this is where you get into the kids thing, right? So you get at last Pharaoh was warned that if he did not let the Israelites go, many Egyptians would die in one night. Now that's hedging the story a little bit. Like that's tripping around the point of the tale, which is baby children die. Like it's like the children that are gonna die, the firstborn, right? Like it's the kids of various ages, but it's the kids that are gonna die. I mean, it is a lot of Egyptian, but we leave that out, like the wailing of the parent. It says that God told Moses the Israelites should mark their doors with red so none of them would die. On that night, many Egyptians died, but no Israelites died, which I guess is a little bit of the point, but we're missing out on the whole angel of death thing and the passing over. Like the passing over is like the angel of death passed over those in any case. So you can see what happens when you start trimming out the icky parts of stories. You lose a little bit of the punch and a little bit of the point. And finally Pharaoh is like weeping and he's like, get out of Egypt. And then we get this incredible spread. We got this great spread of Moses leading the Israelites out of Egypt, blowing their horns ahead of them. It's just a great spread. Kudos to the Berenstains for this amazing image, which, probably going to be my Facebook cover photo next week. So, it's a good one. We got sphinxes. We've got pyramids. They get to the sea. There's the parting of the Red Sea. It drowns. You get to see Pharaoh drowning in the waves. It's all good stuff. The Berenstain Bears Storybook Bible is it's a good storybook Bible. I really actually enjoy it. Mike takes his religion pretty seriously, and so he knows that there's important things you just don't leave out of stories. I mean, you are losing like the specifics of certain deaths, but you don't lose the death. So you have Jesus, you end up having him getting crucified. You don't see him on the cross, but you see enough of him on the cross. Like the image of Jesus on the cross is fairly graphic for a Berenstain Bears book. It's all in shadow, but it's there. It doesn't call out the thieves on either side of him. That's in some of the stories, but they are portrayed as shadow people in the thing. And I say shadows, you see dimension and detail. It's just very hazy, like as if you're seeing them through, through the sun disappears and the storm rages. Like it covers all that. They roll the stone away. The angel's there. I think we've talked about this angel, the concerned, stern angel who scares away all the guards. He's like, don't worry, Jesus is coming back. We get Jesus back. We get Saul being blinded on the road to Damascus and becoming Paul. You got all kinds of stories in here. You have Good Samaritan. You have the Fisher of Men. You have Jonah and the giant fish. It does not say whale. It's a giant fish. Just double checking on that one. I'm trying to find, there's a classic illustration from this that you'll sometimes see on social media. That's a very famous picture from the Berenstain Bears Storybook Bible, and people include it because it's a little funny, I guess. If I can find it, if it's actually in here. Is it actually in here? Well, we do get to see Adam Bear and Eve Bear buck nude. We do get to see that, so if that's what you're into, that's available for your, edification. But I guess I don't see it. There's Queen Esther. We get the story of Esther. Pretty cool. Daniel in the lion's den. We get, let's see, there's the fish. Ah, here we go. So Mary and Joseph go to Bethlehem, and baby Jesus is born. The shepherds are out tending the flock, and it says an angel came to them in a bright light, and they were afraid. And the angel says, "Be not afraid." And you've seen the memes with like the biblically accurate angels. This isn't that kind of angel. This is just a person angel. But Mike is like, angels are kind of weird, right? So he drew this picture. I think it's Mike. This may be Jan. I don't know. But it's the wheel of angels. I don't know how to describe this other than showing it. But it's an angel surrounded by a wheel of angels. Not a circle of angels. Like not encircling him, but like an actual wheel made up of the bodies of angels saying, "Don't be afraid," which is the wildest thing in the world an angel can do. Like, right? Like being like, don't worry about what you're seeing here. This is totally normal. But it's not. It's not, because even if it was just an angel, I'd be like, oh, no, please, I didn't mean to. But if it's an angel surrounded by like the bodies of angels, all like, hey, don't be afraid, I'd be very afraid of what was happening. Again, because this God isn't a God at this point that's famous for being like not weird. He's famous for being very weird. The stories are pretty weird. So that's the Berenstain Bears Storybook Bible. And that was followed up by a little book called the Berenstain Bears Storybook Bible for Little Ones. And let me pull this up. I got to make sure I'm on the right page here. Yeah. So this is the Storybook Bible for Little Ones. And this was published in, well, I don't know. I don't know when it was published. When was this published? I can't find the info on it because I'm using this terrible online. Because I can't find my physical copy, I'm having to use the Kindle version of it, which is wretched. Kindle's version of most children picture books, they're not the best, and I hate them, and they're not great, and I kind of hate them. But I guess we'll just take a look. So the Berenstain Bears Storybook Bible for Little Ones, published after the Storybook Bible. Now this uses illustration from the Storybook Bible, but you're gonna see why things start getting weird pretty quickly with what we're dealing with here. So the stories are significantly fewer. We have creation, we have Noah building the ark, we have David meets Goliath, which is a way to put it, I guess. We have Daniel in the lion's den. We have the birth of Jesus. So right there, we're skipping. So none of the patriarchs represented in this book. We go right from Noah to David to Daniel, which is quite a jump. And then right from that to the birth of Jesus, Luke 1, then to the good neighbor, which is the Good Samaritan, Jesus in Jerusalem, which is just about him being crucified, and then Jesus coming back from the dead. So, as you can see, the stories are kept fairly simple. God made everything. He made the sky, the land, and the water. He called the land earth, and he covered it with plants and trees. God made all the animals that fly in the sky and swim in the water. He made seagulls and geese and eagles, whales and octopus and all kinds of fish. For 6 days, God kept creating good things. He made animals like zebras and elephants. Then finally, God made a man and a woman. He named them Adam and Eve, and God loved them very much. On the seventh day, God rested, and God blessed that seventh day and made it his special day of rest. Then you go on to Noah and the ark. Nothing about the fall of man. Nothing about the original sin, nothing about the tree of knowledge of good and evil, nothing about the snake, just a bunch of an unnecessary list of animals. Seagulls and geese, eagles, whales, octopuses, zebras, and elephants get name checked, but not the actual story, other than that the seventh day is a day of rest. Compare this with the original Storybook Bible, which really does go on. Like it covers like it really covers like the steps of the the days, what happens on each day. Everything's good. The day of rest. Then we get to the chapters with the birth of, with the good and evil. We get the snake, Adam and Eve eating the fruit, the fall of man, being expelled from the garden, yada, yada, yada. That does move on directly into Noah's and the ark, but that's what happens in the Bible as well. Like that, it pretty much just is like, and then there were giants in the earth, and then the angels came down and mated with humans, and then it was time for Noah and the ark. So we lose the giants and the mating, but we don't lose the Noah. So, you know, like that, okay, fair enough. But the children's version of this just jumps right from creation to Noah building the ark. Now, in this version, many years after Adam and Eve were alive, most of the people on earth were doing evil things. So God made a plan. He went to his friend Noah for help. God knew Noah was always very good and his family would help. God said, I'm going to make it rain for a long time. The water will cover everything on earth. Please build an ark, Noah. Follow my directions very carefully. You know what to do. Doesn't say what God's plan is, which is killing everybody, every living thing except for what's on this ark. Noah builds an ark. It was hard work, but they didn't give up. He took 2 of every animal. They marched on board. It started to rain. They're safe they're still safe when the rain stops. That's the end. The original Storybook Bible covers a lot more of like the ins and outs, the intricacies, and the why and the wherefores of Noah's Ark. This one cuts that out, instead making it, again, like creation, more a story of the animals. I remember reading, I think I was listening to Bill Moyers, this is years ago, one of those like, let's talk to a bunch of experts about the Bible. I can't remember. I think it was Bill Moyers did it, but in any case, he had a bunch of experts on discussing chapters from the Bible. I think not just experts, I think like famous people as well, just like celebrities, but, and kind of like, and so you're learning like the backgrounds of these stories, you're learning like the different interpretations of these stories, but also people's kind of experiences with these stories. And one of the guests was like, Noah's Ark was always unusual to me as a kid because it was very much a child's story. And I think it was Moyers, somebody, or maybe one of the guests was like, what do you mean it's a child's story? It's about like the death of all, like of all living creatures. It's horrible. It's horrifying. And she was like, no, you don't understand. Like to a child, you're sold the story of Noah's Ark as like a story of like cute animals and a fun boat, and you get like action figures and little dolls and a little you have stickers of it, and you have 2 of each kind, and a boy and a girl, and they all go on the boat and you can play with the boat. And that's kind of the story of Noah's Ark, leaving out the death part, like the whole like the death part and the drunkenness part, and the Tower of Babel part, because we skip the Tower of Babel, go right to David meeting Goliath, David using his sling to strike down the giant. Doesn't say he kills it, doesn't say that he decapitates it, which he does. He decapitates Goliath. It just says he helped save Israel. We don't really get any background on who Goliath was or what Goliath was doing. Let's compare that to how it is in the original Storybook Bible. Let's see how the Berenstains handled this, which in the original Storybook Bible is, man, it's not until page 120 because we've covered the entire Exodus by this point. So David's a young shepherd in Israel, uses his sling to drive beasts away. Talks about King Saul arriving. It talks about King Saul. David's brother is going to fight with King Saul. And then Goliath showing up with an enemy army, towering over everyone. No one's brave enough. Have this whole thing where David wants to go and fight. He comes up with it goes on for pages. He comes up with the idea of using the sling. He goes and he collects the rocks. He stands up to Goliath. He hits him in the middle of the forehead. Goliath falls to the ground with a crash that shakes the earth. Still doesn't say he's dead, but you do see his body with X's for eyes, which is the children's book way of saying that man is dead. Then we get Daniel in the lion's den. Well, we skip David. We skip Esther, of course, because why would you cover the story of Esther? He says sarcastically. Daniel in the lion's den comes up next. This is kind of the story. Daniel's an Israelite living in Babylon, helping the king. The king likes Daniel, which makes people jealous. So they conspire. It says they tell the king that Daniel loves God more than the king. And they say Daniel prays to his God every day. That breaks the law, which I believe in the Bible, they actually convince the king first to change the law so that you have to pray to the king. In any case, it's kind of the same thing. Daniel has to be thrown to the lions, gets thrown to the lions. Of course, he lives. Now it says so the king made a new law, and of all the people were to respect Daniel's God, and they could all worship in peace, which I believe he actually made a law that they had to worship Daniel's God. And also the people who conspired against Daniel were instead thrown to the lions, as well as their wives and their children. So that it kind of leaves kind of leaves that part out. But then so does the original Storybook Bible. Moving on to the birth of Jesus, because why not? I mean, they go to Mary and Joseph go to Bethlehem, and she gives birth to Jesus. That's really it. I love the end of it, though. It says, "That is where Mary had her baby. She wrapped him in cloths and laid him in a manger. His name is Jesus," said Joseph. All right, great. Okay, thanks, Joseph, I guess. Like, that's his name. Like, that's not even, let's name him Jesus. Like, his name is Jesus. Then we get the Good Samaritan. So someone asks Jesus, "Who's my neighbor?" And he tells a vague version of the Good Samaritan. And they're like, "Oh, okay." And then he goes to Jerusalem. They sing hosannas at him. But not everyone loved Jesus. One night he went to the garden to pray with his disciples. While they were there, a bad man named Judas brought soldiers to the garden. The soldiers took Jesus away. It doesn't say that like Judas betrayed. That's kind of the point of the Judas story, is that he was one of Jesus's followers who betrayed Jesus. Like it could have even said like one of Jesus's friends brought the soldiers there. Like, oh, that was me. Like even that, just some guy named Judas. They take him away. The disciples run away because they don't want to see Jesus get hurt. I think it's mostly because they don't want to get hurt by being associated with him. But the soldiers, spoilers, did hurt Jesus, is what it says. Jesus was sad, but reminded them, God loves you. That day, Jesus died. We don't get any real details on that. Just he died. They carried his body. When they open it up, Jesus is gone. He rose from the dead. He's alive. They go on. His friends go on to preach about him. Jesus goes up to heaven. They tell everyone about Jesus. That's the end of the book. So the reason I bring this up, the reason I cover this, the reason I want to talk about this, and I don't really want to get like too deep into the weeds here, but the reason I find this so important and so interesting and fascinating is Christians in particular, followers of Christianity, followers of Jesus, tend to operate with the understanding that these stories, there's a core group of stories from what they call the Bible. This is actually two separate Bibles, by the way, two separate collections of important religious texts that have been combined by them into one. There are certain stories in this that sort of form the central canon, the central, you need to know these tales, at least the rough outlines of, not for any reasons other than they are important to know. It's just important to know these. That's kind of how it was presented to me, which is these are important, these are very important stories. You need to know the story of the loaves and the fishes. You need to know Daniel in the lion's den. You need to know David and Goliath. You need to know Noah's Ark. You have to understand all this stuff, but you have to understand all of it free of real context. We're not going to make you understand it within the context of the entire history of religion. We're not going to make you understand it even within the entire arc of the stories you're reading, like within those full books. We're only going to make you understand it, not even within the chapters the books are pulled from, but we're going to only have you comprehend these tales in very like mutated, simplified, almost like coloring book levels of narrative so that they lose any form of potency. And then we can fill in the meaning for you when you ask questions. But we don't want you going to the source. Like we know that the source is too complicated. We know that the source is too much for a child, but it's still important you get these. So we'll talk about Jesus being dragged away by Romans. We'll talk to you about the fact that nobody liked him, but we won't cover the trial or who Judas was or what Jesus was really doing. Like we'll talk about the Samaritan. We're going to try to cut everything away so that all you really get is that there was this boy who was born, magical beings predicted him coming, or said he had come. Like we don't really get a prediction in this one. He tells a story about being a good neighbor. For some reason, people don't like him. For some reason, he's arrested. For somehow he dies. We don't know how he dies in the little one's verse. Somehow he died. Somehow Palpatine returned. Somehow Jesus died. We don't know anything else. Then he comes back. Then he goes away. The end. And but it's important that you tell everyone about him. We don't know why. we don't really know who the Israelites are. We hear about them in a few stories, not really filled in on that, because we lose the entire Exodus. But someone felt that's not important for children to know, for Christian children to know. They don't need to know the Exodus part. They don't need to know the Passover part. They don't need to know the Ten Commandments part. They don't need to know the whole Moses. They don't need to know Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, Joseph. They don't need to know any of that. They sort of need to know David a little bit. They sort of need to know Daniel a little bit. But they only need to know David as far as he was a powerful little boy who used his slingshot to kill a giant man, knock him down. We don't need to know much about Daniel. He had a whole book. There's a whole book of Daniel. Know if you know this? There's a whole book of Daniel in there. All we know is that he got thrown to the lions didn't touch him. A story that I always confuse with the story of Androcles and the lion, which is a different story, similar, different story. Also a story that is easily confused with because it's basically the same story as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Like they're both the same basic thing. Like they had a lot of faith. They get thrown into the fire, into the lion's den. They don't get hurt. The person who threw them in is like, holy moly, guess that's the right God to worship. Kind of the same story. We don't get any of that context. We don't know why we're being taught these stories, unless the parents follow up, but most parents don't. I would say most parents don't. They're sort of like left dangling. These are just important stories. It's kind of like when I'm driving with my 13-year-old and I suddenly get it into my head that she really needs to understand that the original line of Transformers was actually two separate toy lines in America, in Japan. And when they came to America, they combined those two toy lines. But that's why it's more than two actually, but the two main toy lines. But that's why there's two completely different scales of vehicles in the initial Transformers toy line. That'll pop into my head. I'll be like, it's important that I'll be driving and I'll be like, so in Japan, there was a toy company called Takara, and Mitzi will listen politely. She is a polite child, but she doesn't understand why that's important to know. I don't understand why that's important to know because I just know it's important. That's what being a Christian is like, I guess. Like, these stories are important, but darned if you could tell anyone why, I guess. Unless you're like a biblical scholar, I guess you wouldn't know why, but I don't know. In any case, I certainly didn't when I was a kid. That's the fascinating thing about these stories. I have really, really mixed feelings about Bible stories. I have really, really mixed feelings about cute summations of adult stories for children. I even feel weird about you can get little golden books now of older adaptations of movies for adults, but that have been softened for kids. It's cute, it's funny, and you can actually read them to kids and they won't be scared or they won't be offended or they won't be grossed out or anything because they're little golden book versions of Alien and stuff. And you're like, haha, it's funny. But I feel the same way about those. I don't to me, that's a thing that people do, and I understand it's a joke. I understand it's a joke. You don't have to come at me. But that's what these Bible stories feel like. They feel like, it's just kind of cute. It doesn't really mean anything. I guess it's just, it's the same thing. It's literally little golden book versions of story that after a while, I'm just like, why does this even exist if not for the amusement of the adults who can laugh at turning the story of the torture and crucifixion of an adult man into a children's book? I just find that weird and in a picture book, ooh, and it's bears. They're bears doing it. I don't know. Moving on. There's another book on the horizon that I've made mention of. So I'm going to disappear for a second so you can take a look at the Berenstain Bears Storybook Bible, Search and Find. So this is an even weirder. This is the final weird adaptation of the Berenstain Bears Storybook Bible because this is full on. You get a basic concept of a story. In the beginning, God made the heavens and the earth. God covered the earth with plants and trees. God made all the animals that live on the earth, and he made a man and a woman. They were called Adam and Eve. God saw that it was all good. That's your creation story. But the whole point is that you're looking at a spread from the actual book, a beautiful 2-page spread. And then it says, find the objects hidden in this picture. And so find the alligator. There it is. Find the flying bird, the pelican. There it is. Find the frogs. There they are. Find the rooster. There it is. Find the, what is that? A goose. There it is. Find the 2 mice. There they are. Find the bluebird. There it is. Find the buffalo. There it it is. Find the 2 pelicans swimming. There they are. Find the zebra. There they are. Find the dolphin. There she is. And find the ewe. There she is. That's it. Like, it's a really easy find the page book. So we go from the story of the creation to Noah's Ark, but it's Noah's family getting off the ark. God told Noah to build an ark and take his family and 2 of every creature onto the ark with him. So now we're losing even more of this story. When all the creatures were safe on board, it rained for 40 days and nights until water covered all the earth. Don't know why that happened. Only Noah, his family, and the animals in the ark were safe. Well, good thing God told him to build that ark, because God somehow knew that it was going to rain. God set a rainbow in the clouds and promised he would not bring so great a flood on the earth again. Oh, God did that? That's weird. Where's the butterfly? Where's the bull? Where's the owl? Where's the goat? Where's the worms? Where's the fox? Where's the monkeys? Where's the cat? I love that the picture of the cat that's like, find this cat. But the actual image of the cat is the cat coming up over a hill. So you only see the top half of the cat. So you only see the top half of the cat in the find the cat portion of the book. Again, though, love these drawings. I love the way the Berenstains draw animals. And I love these wrinkly elephants. We're skipping right from that to the Exodus. So, hey boy, we get the Exodus again. So we're going back. Mike has decided the Exodus is important to keep. So we see the Israelites storming out of Egypt. We see Moses angry as all get out with the sphinxes in the background. The Pharaoh of Egypt did not like the Israelites. He treated them badly and made them work very hard. God told Moses to tell Pharaoh to let all the Israelites go free, but Pharaoh refused. So God punished Pharaoh and all of Egypt. Pharaoh finally agreed to let God's people go. Moses led them out of Egypt across the desert to a new land. I think that's a pretty good summation of the Exodus. I think that covers all the salient points. It asks you to find an Israelite with something on her head. It asks you to find an Israelite with something on his shoulder. It's mostly pictures of Israelites. It asks you to find a dog. There's a dog being chased by a ram in the picture. So now you're trying to find a sort of comical picture of a dog. There's a shofar. You got to find the shofar that's being blown by an Israelite in the it's in the Israelites' hands. I assume that's supposed to be Aaron, who's following right behind Moses. It's in the Israelites' hands. They've sort of clipped the shofar for the little find these pictures, but they've done a really ham-fisted job at redrawing the parts that were usually covered by his hands. Just doesn't look that great. Find a guy on camelback. Find a lamb. Find a sphinx head. Another Israelite on camelback. Another lamb. It's mostly lambs and Israelites. But my favorite is find this shepherd's crook. There's a shepherd's crook, and in the actual image, it's a long crook being held by a bear. They've cut the most of the length of the crook off, but they didn't cut off the hand, so it's just the upper half of a crook being held by a disembodied hand, which is, I think it's unsettling. So moving on, we have David, which this is kind of cool. So we have David was a young shepherd in Israel who took good care of his father's sheep. Later in his life, David was chosen to be the king of all Israel. He was a good king and a great leader. He also wrote and sang many songs called Psalms in praise of God. And this is a counting picture. None of the other ones have been counting pictures. You got to find 6 apples, 1 ram, 3 flowers, 9 sheep, 2 squirrels, 4 bunnies, 2 swans, 4 ducks. I don't know if these animals are all native to the area in which Daniel lived. 5 fish, 2 birds, 1 shepherd's crook, and 1 David's head, sorry. One of David's heads, which there's only one in the picture, so it's not that hard to find. It's a bucolic image, but I like the fact that they're like, we're not going to talk about David and Goliath. We're going to just talk about the fact that David became king, and he was a pretty good king, pretty good leader. It's nice. That's a good thing, Mike. I like that you did that. I like that they did that. And then moving on, you go right from that to Daniel in the lion's den. And the king of Babylon made a law saying people could not pray to God. But Daniel went on praying. The king liked Daniel, but he couldn't go against his own law. He ordered that Daniel be thrown into a den of savage lions. The next day, when the king looked inside, he saw Daniel petting the lions. Everyone was amazed that Daniel was unhurt. The king made a new law saying that all in the land should respect Daniel's God. That's more or less the story. You gotta find 2 lion heads, a cat. You gotta find the guy who's going to be thrown to the lions after this, because he's one of the guys who got Daniel in trouble anyway. A creepy, deepy spider. The creepiest Berenstain spider I've ever seen. It's just 2 eyeballs and 8 legs. You get the king's crown. Daniel looking pleased with himself, being caressed and cradled by licking lions. And a few sticks, I guess. They're I think they're, what are they, spines? I think it's just the spines of previous victims. So have fun, kids. The Bible's good for storytelling. There's also a lot of bugs down and there's like a bee down in the lion's den, which I don't think is true. I don't think bees would be in the lion's den. Biblical scholars, help me out. Were there bees in the lion's den? I want to know. And then we get Jesus being born, the angel delivers. See, like, unlike the little ones, even though these are very short stories too, this includes the angel giving word to Mary of having a baby named Jesus. They get to the stable. It's just the animals in the stable. You got to find all the animals. And 8 stars, 5 mice, things like that. Then we get, okay, new story, or story that was not included in the previous short version, Jesus walking on water. This is mostly just finding seafood. Like, it's just, there's like a lobster and a crab and a couple of fish and like a seahorse, like, and another fish. Like, it's just a bunch of fish mostly. And then Jesus, can you find Jesus walking on the water? Yeah, it's kind of easy. And you see the fishermen like, oh, holy goodness. You get the Last Supper, which was left out of the little ones. And this is a longer adaptation. This is a 2-page spread with 2 pages of narration talking about the Passover supper. There's a lot of controversy over whether or not this was a Passover supper. I believe it wasn't I believe it wasn't actually a Passover. I believe it was like before Passover. Like, it's like your final supper before Passover was supposed to start. I believe that's how it worked. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this says it's Passover. I don't think it was. I think it wasn't. We get the blood and the wine and the bread and the body. After the supper, Jesus was death, just skips right to Jesus coming back to life. Within the same page. Can you find 3 disciples' headbands and a couple of crawling cats? A lot of the pictures you're supposed to find were added later by cut and pasters, because there's 2 cats in this picture that are clearly the same cat, one of which has been cutted and pasted and flipped horizontally. So that's fun and something. The other thing is you have to find is 9 sets of eyes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 eyes open wide, which is pretty funny. Like, not the bears with their eyes at half mast, just 9 open wide eyes. And then the last page is just the back of the book. So that's the Berenstain Bears Storybook Bible, Search and Find. 3 different interpretations of basically the same thing. 3 different interpretations of Storybook Bible, children's storybook Bibles. And that Search and Find book just came out last year. It just came out. It was just made available. I got it on digital. So if there's a difference between it and the physical copy, let me know. But I have the digital version, which as far as I can tell is just the same thing. It's just a search and find. It's not interactive or anything. You just find the pictures, which are fairly simple. And the formatting on the Storybook Bible for little ones is weird. I don't care for it. I wished I had my physical copy on me to show you how different it is. It's pretty different formatting wise, but it's the same content. The pictures are all taken from the original Storybook Bible. So you're not getting any new art, just the formatting of the art's different. And the Search and Find has added elements to some of the original spreads just so you have more things to find. But that's it. Like, it's 3 books. Now, I've made my feelings on Bible stories known. They're not, I am of the belief that storybook Bible stories are useful introductions to the stories. However, if you have to cut out 75% of the tale in order to make it palatable for children, it's just not a story you need to bother telling the kids now. It really isn't. Like, if you're not going to give them the gory details, then you're not doing them any favors. I don't know. That's my personal belief. I don't think you should tell children things that are going to be scary or upsetting to them. So just wait. If it's an important story in your theology, you're gonna have to wait. If your kid's like, well, then why? What's going on? What's with the resurrection? What's with Easter about? You gotta tell them that Jesus was crucified and came back from the dead. Like, that's it. If you're leaving that part out, you're gonna have a lot of catching up to do later. That's my belief. If you're telling them the story of the Passover, you gotta include the blood. You gotta include the firstborn. You gotta include all that, because that's part of the story. Oh, but that's so violent. Oh, but that's so scary. Yeah, it was a violent, scary time to be alive. It was a violent, scary thing to kind of be caught up in the middle of. It was a violent, scary thing. Like, global politics, particularly when religions are involved, particularly when kings are involved and leaders of any sort, can be pretty scary and violent. And even if you don't have any particular theology or believe anything particularly like magical or theological in the Bible, it does cover a lot of global politics. And just from that era and that area. And there's a lot of wars and a lot of leaders and a lot of kings and a lot of everyday Joe Schmoes rising up and becoming leaders and kings and warriors and soldiers and messiahs and prophets and dying in horrible ways. And that's kind of the story of the history of civilization. If you take a look at it, if you take a little more than a peep, you'll figure that out. But so that's the Storybook Bibles, the Berenstain Bears Storybook Bibles. I highly recommend the big one. I highly recommend the original Storybook Bible. Why? I think the illustrations in it are some of my favorite Berenstain Bears illustrations. They're super colorful. They're super well done. There's a lot of passion behind them. There's a lot of fun behind them. They don't pull too many punches. You get that crucifixion scene. You get the Wheel of Angels. You get the great Noah's Ark and the Exodus pictures. They're just great. They're grand. They're good. They're great. I'm glad I own my copy of it because you can't buy it digitally. You can't buy this book any way other than a physical copy. I don't know why, but you certainly can't. Seems like it would be a good addition to anyone's digital library, but it ain't out there. So buy it. Buy a hardback copy. It's a good, it looks nice on a shelf. Look at the spine. Like that's classic children's storybook Bible spine right there. And that's it. Now I can wipe these books off of my master list. Now I can stop worrying about these books that have just been squatting there, bothering me for so long. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being a part of this mad experiment called Deep in Bear Country Berenstain Bearcast. I am your host, Phil Gonzalez. I've been doing this for a long time, so long. I'm 47 years old now. I'm 47 years old. I'm turning 48 in a couple of months. Look at the gray in my beard. If you're watching this on YouTube, look at the gray in my beard. I did not have this much gray in my beard when I started this ridiculous show, which I have been doing now since 2015. 9 years I've been doing this. 9 years. That's a long time. I was in my 30s when I started this thing, and I am approaching 50, my friends. Think about that. Think about where you were 9 years ago. Crazy old world. Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for being a part of this thing. And I will see you all next time, deep in Bear Country.